Welcome to the Law Life Podcast. Today we have amazingly intelligent, beautiful Lauren Wadden. Hey, Lauren, thanks so much for being on. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time to be here. So, Lauren, let's start with your law school journey. Like, what inspired you to become a lawyer? You know, bring it back to like the early days before you went to law school.
So basically, my parents are both lawyers, and they always told me growing up, you can be anything you want except a lawyer. And
Except a lawyer. Good advice.
And I always joke, I like to find really expensive ways to disappoint them. So I went to law school. I'd always loved reading and writing. I never really consciously thought about it that much. It was just always something I was going to do, something I wanted to do. I applied to a ton of schools. I ended up going to my undergrad alma mater, USC, for law school.
I'm a fellow Trojan as well. Okay. So you went to USC for undergrad.
Yeah.
You started there. Okay. And what was your major?
Philosophy, politics, and law major.
Oh, okay. Is that like a triple major?
It wasn't like a triple major. It was kind of like three separate majors all mushed into one. And I had actually transferred from San Francisco State to USC because of law school, because I figured my chances of getting into a better law school were better if my grades were from a better school. I wanted them to not look like inflated. And I know that sometimes schools have preferences for like alma maters and stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of factored into my decision to transfer as an undergrad.
And then after 4 years of undergrad, you decide, I'm going to go against my parents' advice and I'm going to become a lawyer. I mean, how did that happen? What was the connection there?
It was something I wanted to do. I think that law is so malleable and one person can really change it. You have one person arguing in front of the Supreme Court. You can completely change the way everyone's day-to-day life has changed. So
no, having the knowledge is power.
Exactly. Yes. And I just really liked everything, like learning. I liked loopholes a lot. So that was something that always interested me in law, is the way that different things can be interpreted.
The logic behind it.
So I took the LSAT twice, I think. I took a year off between undergrad and law school.
What did you do during that year?
So I worked at a public relations firm for a little bit. Then COVID hit and they knew I was going to law school. So they were like, bye.
Yeah.
So I pretty much then just sat at home waiting for law school to start, watching bad TV for a few months.
So did you got into USC like no wait list, just like right in? Wow, that is so your grades must have been very strong.
Yeah, I had pretty good grades. And at that point I had a median LSAT. I know that the LSAT has changed a lot in the schools. But at that point I had their median for getting in and I had really good grades going from undergrad. And I got a really decent scholarship there.
Very nice. Wow, impressive. So did you live on campus at USC or did you commute?
In undergrad, I lived actually on the row. I'm on frat and sorority row. And then in law school, I commuted from sort of like mid-city area.
Got it. Okay. And what was your law school experience like at USC?
That's really interesting. I didn't adore law school, to be honest.
Was that surprising to you?
It was. You know, everyone said it's going to be hard. I didn't quite realize, I think, how taxing it was. I also started 1L in 2020. So a year and a half of my law school life was online.
It was the beginning. Your 1L was online.
Yeah.
That must have been really hard. So you can't like meet friends and like you don't have that camaraderie. How did you do that? So what was that like being a 1L during COVID?
It was horrible, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it feels like 1L is so encompassing of your life. You do everything, like your whole life is school. But then when you don't have like that separation between like the outside world and school, because you're in your apartment 24/7, it just always feels like you should be doing more. You know, you watch TV for an hour, you're like, well, I could just go over to my desk and study. But at a certain point, you're just burned out. And it was just a lot of burnout, I think. And I thought sort of 1L burnout persisted throughout law school.
The tone, right? Like for the rest of the time.
And I think it was really hard transitioning also then from an online to an in-person. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of COVID concerns, things like that popped up during the actual, like when I was back in class. So that was difficult. Yeah. And there was always, you know, professors that like couldn't work Zoom or like couldn't talk through the masks or
Right.
There was always something.
It was a shit show. Let's be honest. It was a scary time because a lot of people were, getting sick and losing loved ones. That was really devastating. That time was so hard for so many. And I don't even know how some people got through it. So, and the law students, I saw what law students went through and not having, and all students really not having that camaraderie, that connection, that social connection that is so important during law school. Because, everyone's coming in their 1L just as scared coming into your first year of law school. You really don't know what to expect or how hard it's going to be. So to do that online, I hope that and pray we never get to that point again. So you get there, you're a year and a half into law school, and then you go back your 2L mid-year in person. COVID stuff is still going on. So it's still not back to status quo. But what were your grades like? I mean, your grades in undergrad were really good. So was law school very different for you?
I worked my ass off and my grades weren't good. It's really interesting in law school because in undergrad, you sort of, if you do well in one subject, you do kind of well in all the others. I think it's pretty uniform.
Okay.
Whereas law school, because you have such different classes, you have tax versus Civ Pro versus First Amendment.
Law. It's also
so
different.
Mm-hmm. That some classes I did great and I really understood the material. It really clicked with me. Other classes, I just couldn't. I couldn't even begin to fathom it. Civ Pro was horrible for me.
Civil procedure was challenging. It's funny. You're like the second guest I've had on the podcast that has mentioned civil procedure because it's just so procedural. And unless you're litigating a case from beginning to end, it's really hard as, law student to conceptualize, especially if you've never worked in a civil law firm, how a complaint really goes through the whole court system. But civil procedure definitely is that one where we get a lot of pushback. Until you really are executing those procedural mechanisms, it can be just kind of like a rule on a paper. So how do you conceptualize something like removal or remand? It's kind of like just paper being pushed through the system. But it's a lot more than that, once you're litigating. Okay, so not liking some subjects, obviously, that's very normal in law school for anyone listening, starting out their law school journey, to love some subjects, hate others. Were you ever in any jeopardy in any classes?
I definitely had some major breakdowns after getting grades because I wasn't necessarily an A student, especially my first semester. I did, to be candid, get the lowest grade in the class in Civ Pro because it shows you the ranking. And I remember she's one of my good friends now, but someone connected me with someone else who had gotten a really low grade there one year. And we talked and I was like, should I just drop out at this point? And she was like, no, I'm like 2L, almost a 3L now. And it gets way better. There's some subjects that are bad. So she talked some sense into me. But yeah, I definitely did have that doubt at a lot of points during my 1L of maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah, let's talk about that more because in my journey, it was contracts. And I was put in my second semester, it was broken into 2 semesters. I was put in the lower contracts class. And for anyone listening, I was devastated. The dean brought me into the office. They had a talk with me and I was like, it was not connecting for me. I mean, I could picture the contract. Obviously, I knew what a contract was, but just all the different codes were not connecting for me. And I remember being like, is this meant for me? Am I supposed to be doing this now? 17 years later, or almost 18 years from when I started law school. Oh my God, that sounds crazy. I can write a contract. I can edit a contract. I can litigate a contract top to bottom. So for anyone listening that's in a subject, in a class, that is worrying if that's going to determine their career, it is not. It is not going to determine your career. You're going to get through the class, do your best, just pass the class, let that be your objective, and you will be okay. So, okay, how was it socially when you went back after COVID?
Yeah, well, luckily, so I had found 2 girls to move in with before I started law school. I wanted to live with other law students because I knew we weren't really going to get that sense of camaraderie outside of school with COVID. Luckily, I had 2 best friends starting law school. Our group kind of just grew and grew from that. And I had a great time socially. I think I almost want to say it was like my social peak. Like I had so much fun with my friends. I had a great group of girlfriends. We still are all in a group chat together to this day. We talk about work now instead of classes.
Did you study for the bar together?
Yeah, we did. We did the first time around. I have like a giant table at my house, like a 10-foot table in my living room. And we would all just hunker down and we would just study together. I really found I studied best with other people because it kept me focused to see someone else focusing at the same time versus wanting to get up and like rearrange or do whatever. So that helped a lot. And it just helped to have someone to look at and like, oh, from across the table, you know what I mean? To just be like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling. And they would be like, I'm struggling too.
So you would study together every day in the study group?
Pretty much every day. It would sort of like a rotation. So like one friend would come over one day, another friend would come over another day. I would say 90% of the time I was studying with other people.
And were you taking Barbary? Were you the first time?
I was in Themis.
You were in Themis. Okay. And how did you find that studying going? Like as you were in your preparation, did you feel a high level of connectivity and flow? Was the schedule good for you? What was the experience like that time?
I had a horrible time, to be honest. I really struggled. I felt overwhelmed all the time. Something that I really struggled with the commercial bar program was I didn't understand how all the pieces fit together. So I felt like a lot of information was just being thrown at me. I didn't know how to connect it. So I was spending so much time a day. Like I was spending 10, 12-hour days. And I just, because I was trying
10, 12-hour days, that's like half the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was trying to learn the material and then I was trying to put it together.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just didn't work. It didn't work and I was burnt out.
So it was an overwhelming amount of material, which is a very typical feedback for commercial bar prep. You know, a lot of material, a lot of video content on the law. And when you talk about the connectivity, what's important for people to know that maybe are going to take the bar exam soon or, you know, have it upcoming, the connectivity when you come out of law school, you have the mind of a law student. So it's very like one subject at a time, right? I have to pass this final. I have to pass this subject's, you know, appellate brief, whatever you're submitting. When you get to the bar exam, the standard changes to entry-level competent attorney. Well, as an attorney, yes, you can specialize in a certain niche, right? But there is an interconnection always of like if you're a civil litigator, you have civil procedure, the evidence code, and then whatever area you're specializing in, which can cross over with a multitude of other areas. So you are expected to elevate your mindset into, or your wealth of knowledge into that interconnection, because like if you get an essay, there can be a crossover, right? And you're thinking about different areas of law and you have to know how these areas work. And so, yeah, that training definitely doesn't happen in a lot of commercial bar prep. So when you just go into commercial bar prep, a lot of times, and it does work for some applicants for sure, but a lot of applicants get lost in material and it does not allow for that connection to happen. So as you're going through it, were you at any point saying, I don't think this Themis program is working for me? Like I'm getting concerned. And how was your study group feeling about it? Because you were all in Themis together, right?
Some people did Barbary. It was a little split between Barbary and Themis, but we were all in the same sort of like commercial bar prep online, sort of scrolling through the videos. But I would say, yeah, throughout the whole program, I didn't feel good. Now that I passed the bar, my friends also were like, we didn't necessarily think you passed the first time.
They said that to you, your friend? Why? Any idea why they thought that?
I think that they just saw that I wasn't really connecting with the material well, that I wasn't sort of getting it. I spent a lot of time too on the law and not so much time on the practice. They didn't emphasize the things like adaptabar or like, I knew essays were important, obviously. I didn't know like how often I should be drilling them or, you know, stuff like that. So I was like, if I know the law really well, then I can pass the bar. But that's not the case. And I'm sure you'll agree with that it's not just about the law. It's about the structure. It's about the strategy going into 100%. The bar.
Yes, 100%. I think some applicants, you know, to date, I've tutored over 4,500, 5,000 applicants in almost 16 years to be blessed to be doing this. And just so you know, we got word today that they're going to be changing the California, literally hot off the press, they're going to be changing the format of the California bar exam in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years. But the California bar is here to stay. They have declined, the California Supreme Court has declined the portfolio bar exam. So we have an exam that's here to stay. And it's really important that listeners know this, and what you're touching upon is there is bar prep for everybody. Everybody has their home for bar prep in California and across the country. But of course, that's what I specialize in, and that's where they will pass and they will prepare well. Some applicants see the strategy even in commercial bar prep. And it doesn't mean that they're smarter. It doesn't mean they're more capable. I think that's the misconception. It's more, did you have the connection for your type of learning style, for your type of studying? Maybe you're the type, and this is just, and of course I know you from working with you, but hypothetically there could be an applicant where they need more time to prepare, like a fast-paced type scenario just does not work with their learning style to have the, interconnectivity of all the different subjects. It's very normal what you experienced. And it's so important for listeners to hear this, that nothing is wrong with you if you don't pass your first time or your second time or even your fourth time. You have to find a program that's going to fit your learning style. And if you are in a commercial bar prep and you're going, this doesn't feel right? You're any bar prep, you're giving it a chance, meaning like you're actually doing the work, you're carrying out your schedule, you're not half-fasting it, because then you can't really attest to it not working. But if you're actually putting in the effort and it's not feeling right, that's a red flag. And that's where you have to stop and go, what is my learning style? And is this course really fitting with that, right? And not just going through the motions. So as you're doing that and you're like, okay, this isn't feeling right, and even your friends, right, who know you are seeing that, was there ever a thought like, maybe I shouldn't take this bar, I should postpone it, I don't feel right, I don't feel ready? Or you were like, I'm going to go in, I've committed to it, and so I'm going to take it?
I'd always heard, if you do the work and you do the bar prep and you put in enough hours, then you'll pass. So I had said, like, okay, I've been working like 10 to 12-hour days for like 10 weeks. Like, I have to know enough to pass. Like, there's no way I worked my ass off. I've cried. I've been anxious. Like, I've
blood, sweat, and tears. Like, you've given it your all.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm in it to win it. I've worked with so many repeaters, first time takers too, but mostly repeaters. And that is such a big feedback that happens, right? Like, I put the work in. For those, that are or have experienced this or waiting on results, just know, like, there is typically a very high correlation between studying hard and putting the work in and still not passing the exam. Meaning that most repeat applicants don't look back and go, I really was slacking off. I really didn't do what my bar prep was telling me to do. Most will put the effort in. The problem is, well, did they have someone tracking them to say it's actually moving in the right direction? Because you can be very robotic in bar prep. Well, that's part of it. You want to follow a schedule, but at the same time, you have to be adaptable to the applicant. So you take the bar exam, and the first time, when was that? July
23, I guess. Yeah.
That's pretty recent. Okay. July 23. That's an in-person test.
Okay.
And when you came out of the exam, how did you feel?
I didn't feel good. I remember I walked out and I either called my dad or I looked at my friend and I said, I answered 3 multiple choice questions right. And that is all that I can say I answered right. I don't have any idea. And, people were like talking about it around me, which I hate. I still don't like to this day. And
what do I say about that?
It's just a hard no. Yeah.
Tune them out. Don't get involved in that post-bar gossip, because you don't even know if they're right. Okay, so you didn't feel great and you're waiting on results, and then results didn't go your way that first time. Okay. What did that feel like for you?
It was devastating. I mean, out of like, I would say my 9 best friends, me and one other person didn't pass. And so that was really hard. And I was actually fired for not passing my job.
Sorry.
Which had gone against everything that they had told me. It was an OCI job. Everyone says, oh, you get 2 chances. You'll get 2 chances. You're fine.
Our listeners, please, what is the OCI job?
Oh, it's on campus interviewing. So you like go through the process of getting a job through the school, basically, that the firms come to your school, they interview you, and then you get it basically kind of like through this on-campus recruiting program.
Got it. Okay. So you had already landed a position. Had you already started working there?
Yeah. So I had been working there. I worked there as a summer, my 2L. Then I was invited back for after the bar. So I worked, and again, in my understanding that I'd get 2 chances, I worked there August to November to the day of my bar results. Got my bar results that Friday, was then fired that Monday.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. That must have been a real gut punch.
It was. At the same time, it wasn't a good fit of a firm for me. I had been kind of looking to get out of there before I had even gotten bar results. So it was almost this like a bit of a relief of like, okay, well, at least now I'm not stuck here. But it just, I felt like a failure. I felt like a loser. I'm someone I've always, if I've worked hard at something, I've succeeded my whole life. And I worked my ass off for this. I put in so much blood, sweat, and tears, so many tears, and I didn't pass. And I was like, I did everything I possibly could. How could I do this again and pass?
What you're saying is, I mean, for anyone that's going to be listening, they're going to be crying with you. They're going to really understand what that feels like, because that is something, again, that repeaters will say so many times. I put the work in. And that should never be discounted, ever, because when you go to the next round of preparation, we have to see what connected, what didn't, based on the scoring. But at the time, of course, you're feeling like, what else can I do? I've worked so hard and I put all this time in. So where did you go from there? What was your game plan?
I felt bad for myself for a little bit. And then I was like, okay, well, I did the whole 3 years of law school. I worked my ass off. I don't know what else I'm going to do. I have a philosophy degree. So I'm going to do this. Like, I have to pass. I have to pass this.
How long did you wallow in it? How long did you give yourself?
I think like a week or 2.
Okay.
And then I signed up for the next bar and I was like, okay, and Themis didn't work. So I have to find something else. I knew that it didn't work for me. I knew that I didn't connect with the material. That's when I started looking for a different program.
And you just looked online? What?
I actually contacted my LSAT tutor and I was like, hey, do you have any recommendations? And he recommended you. And I actually did look online for a little bit.
What made you feel connected to me? Do you remember what made you feel like this was going to be the right fit for you?
Yeah, it was just basically, we didn't even really talk about the program. I feel like you just talked about the things that were important in order to even start the program, like getting a good mental health, reducing anxiety, getting a good diet, like all things that were part of the program, but
the holistic stuff that we deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not necessarily on paper things. And I realized how comprehensive of a bar program it must be. The fact that all those things were sort of baked and built in, and that you were cognizant of that those were all things, because, I'm not someone that can just shut off my anxiety for anything. I'm someone who has to deal and cope with the anxiety as I'm working, and I needed someone who was going to be able to work with me in that anxiety. And I remember you talked about like health and nutrition and stuff, and I had really let that all slide really badly during the first bar. It was not even a concern or something I had thought about. So when you brought that up, I was like, okay, she knows what she's doing. Like, she's thinking of things that I just completely let slide. I just trusted you immediately.
What you're talking about are the extraneous factors, and not every applicant wants them. They all need it, but not all applicants realize that they need it, and some to higher degrees than others. I have a really big belief system around the extraneous factors. So, of course, there's an underlying preparation that needs to happen. Getting out of the law a little quicker, getting more into approach and strategy, and doing a ton of practice and then having assessment. That's a big part, in a nutshell of the preparatory part of the program. But for me, it is really important, applicant state of mind. And it's funny because recently I actually had an applicant get mad at me about wanting to make sure that her state of mind was in a good place. And that's okay too, right? Like boundaries, and everyone can talk about what they want to talk about. But it is crucial if an applicant is sharing that information, like you did so many times, so bravely, to say, I'm having really bad anxiety over this, and I need to address that. And so, of course, I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but I have generalized anxiety disorder on my own. And I've coped with it for my entire life. Now, of course, when I was younger, they were just telling me that I was too sensitive all the time. But as I got older, I realized like certain scenarios and triggers made me feel like I could not move, and whether it was going to court, whether it was public speaking. My philosophy is if your state of mind is not in a good place, especially coming off of a previous bar where you've put the work in and you feel low and you feel like your confidence is low, well, how are you going to connect now with a next level of preparation? And so many repeaters bring all that into the next round. So I am very willing, if an applicant wants it, to deal with that state of mind and make sure that we try our best to use mechanisms that I know work for me and have worked for other applicants to implement. On top of that, eating healthy is crucial. A few bars ago, I started getting really into like, don't drink too much coffee in the morning. It's, you're going to have a crash by 1 o'clock. And I can't tell you how many emails I got of applicants going like, this really has changed my life, because I just used to wake up and just go right for the coffee. By 1 o'clock, my studying was shot and I just felt like a slump. So those extraneous factors are huge. And thank you for appreciating them and taking to them whatever worked for you, whatever didn't. And then you came into the program and you really worked so hard. I remember just every session you being so focused. What would you say in this round of preparation was different for you?
It all made sense. I remember when I first looked at your essay outlines, I was like, oh, like this is how it all fits together. I had puzzle pieces in my mind that looked like they were from 10 different puzzles, and they were like all scattered. And then I looked at the way you approached it and you put all the pieces together for me. And I feel like in like the more commercial bar preps, they want you to figure it out yourself. I don't know why, because that's not the point of the bar.
It's crazy that they don't have essay approaches, right? Like I don't understand. I never have understood it, because what we're referring to are my approaches where it's based on 25 years of the California bar, and every which way a certain area of law is tested. But as you know, like it's elaborated upon, right? It's not just like a one size, because not every essay is going to fit into a perfect homicide approach or negligence approach. So those really connected for the essay portion for you. And I remember you being a pretty strong writer coming in. And then what about the performance test portion?
Yeah, the performance test I had never really struggled intensely with as much as I struggled with other areas of the
multiple
law.
Choice.
Yeah, it made a little more sense to me when you're given the law. It sort of mimics what I knew how to do, of like extrapolate, get information out. It just clicked more. It was more intuitive to me. It was more fine tuning than it was a whole new approach of like, okay, this is how I can make this better.
Got it. And then what about the multiple choice? Because last time in the exam, you said you only feel like you passed 3. So we do a tracking methodology, if you remember. Did you follow that tracking to a T?
Yes, I always tracked, and it was so different. Well, first of all, I didn't do that many, I guess, because Themis is UWorld, not adaptive, but it's the same sort of idea. I didn't do that because they tested you after each video with their own questions. And I thought, oh, I'm doing so many of these multiple choice questions a day that I don't need to go do extra multiple choice questions. Like they're baked into the Themis.
Got it.
And it had never said, oh, you're not that I remember, oh, go do 50 like UWorld questions or 50 adaptive art questions, whatever. So I didn't really know to do those. And the questions were so different than like what Themis tested you after each video versus like actual bar questions that have been tested. Like, and I, and there were questions where like, you don't really know the law that well because they would just be random questions, but you see enough of them after you do the tracking method that you understand how to answer them. Even if you don't know the exact law, like you get at what they're asking better.
Yeah.
And you can actually see what they want out of you versus just like randomly doing 50 questions, being like, okay, I got 25 wrong, whatever, moving on, or I got 5 wrong, I did well. Like I actually was knowing why I did and didn't do well. And I think that was really the difference in multiple choice for me.
Amazing. Yeah. And thank you for following that, because, it's this misconception that you have to do 50, 60, 70 questions a day. And with us, we do the small sets, and then we track the areas of law that you're pattern-wise consistently getting wrong. So that's wonderful. I want to touch on the anxiety if we can. So is anxiety something you dealt with, since you were a kid? Was it brought on by law school? And how did you deal with it during the bar exam? Like, any tips for listeners that are dealing with that?
Yeah, so I've had horrible anxiety since I was a kid. I still have horrible anxiety. It's gotten definitely more manageable as I've gotten older, but it's something that I do struggle with every day. I've struggled with every day in my life. And you add, the most important test you've ever taken to date, an unlimited amount of information, and it's hell. It's hellacious to deal with all of that. And you're wondering what's going to happen if I don't pass. I would say the second time around, the anxiety was almost worse because number one, I was like, I can't fail this again. I can't do this again. Like,
a lot of pressure.
I can't give up more of my life to this test. And then on top of that, you bring so much in, whether you know it, you're recognizing it or you're not recognizing it. I think you bring so much in from that first or second or third test where you failed.
Totally.
You're like, well, if I couldn't do it that time, why would I be able to do it this time?
The mind screw that goes on, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Mantras, these negative mantras. But, I always say you got to really work through not bringing it in, letting it be there, but like forgiving yourself, not being mad at yourself, and knowing that you are 100% capable. So any coping mechanisms that worked during your preparation, especially the second time?
Yeah, the second time I had to keep telling myself I'm doing it differently. I kept saying I worked so hard last time. How could I have not passed? How am I going to pass this time? And I was just like, it's different. You're understanding the material. You're doing the right things. You're practicing the right things. You're getting the law right. You're getting the structure right. You're not studying in the same way that you were the last time. So you can't compare yourself to the last time because it's a completely different approach.
You change the thoughts that you were telling yourself.
Yeah.
You're shifting the narrative in your mind.
Yeah. And that was really important. And also I talked to you, which was really helpful because I didn't have a person to talk to who was guiding me through this that said, I think you're doing well. I think you're on the right track. I think, you could improve X, Y, Z and blah, 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 but I think you're on the right track. And so I could focus my areas more as to like where I needed to put energy and attention.
Having me assure you that like you were in those assessments on the right track and we had to improve in these areas, but that it was moving in the direction and progressing where it needed to was comforting for you to keep you going.
Definitely.
That's awesome. So exercise, we talk about health, right? Were you exercising during bar prep? Were you eating cleaner, especially the second time around?
Yeah, I like laid off the Postmates a little bit. I like when I did
hard.
Postmates, I know it because I didn't have the energy to cook, but
of course.
I always made sure that I was like eating because I would go like a whole day without eating. I eat like something for breakfast, something small.
Isn't that
and
crazy
then I would
how we operate? Yeah.
Yeah, just like hunker down, study for 10 hours, and then like scarf. Literally, I'd look like an animal eating food at the end of the day. And so I would like make sure I had like a protein bar and some nuts and like some little snackies near me because like I didn't necessarily want to eat, but I needed to eat to like keep my brain fuel up.
Right.
So I did that. I made sure I got outside for at least 20 minutes a day. Sometimes I needed that in the midday. Sometimes I needed that at the end of the day to close off. But I always made sure that I was seeing the light of day, which I
20
didn't
minutes a
do.
day. Hear that? 20 minutes a day outside. It makes such a difference. Take that mental break. Okay. And were you still studying 10, 12-hour days? What
No,
was
definitely
your...
not. I think that is another big difference is I was studying probably 6 to 8 hour days.
That's right.
And at the end of those days, I felt fulfilled. Like I did what I needed to do that day. Like I wasn't behind because I had worked really hard. I had practiced. And I think that's where a lot of that like lesser focus on the law comes in because you're spending more time practicing. You're
Yes.
feeling more accomplished. Like
Yes.
you actually did something.
You're bringing up
You know what I mean?
so many great points, Lauren. Thank you so much, because that is exactly such a pitfall, right? Of just, you learn evidence for 6 hours on a video and then you come out of it, you're wiped out. Your brain is like fried. And then you're like, well, what is my first heading? Am I going to go into relevance? Am I going to go into, the authenticity layers of this item of evidence? Like, the strategy of how to is so much more important. And that is great. So you take the bar the second time and obviously you pass. Major congratulations. So that was February 24, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very recent. Good for you for persevering, for working hard. What a great example of, you can work hard and, put your all in, but then say, okay, I'm not used to not passing something, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to give up, and I'm not a quitter. So good job doing that. And it was so delightful working with you. You were an amazing applicant, so focused. And I'm really happy that you were in the program and you were able to get it done. I mean, there was no doubt about it, but you really did the program, followed everything I gave you, and then also made sure that we were working on that mind, body, spirit aspect to the preparation as well, that I think is so important. And then what are you doing now? Where are you working now? What's going on in your life now?
So I'm working at a firm called Richards, Watson, Gershon. It's more of a municipal law firm. They do like governmental work. So I'm in like one of their litigation practice groups, focuses primarily on eminent domain.
Okay.
But does a little other,
Hot
does some
topic
other.
on the bar exam. Hot topic on the bar exam. Yeah. Okay.
I get flashbacks. Sometimes I see certain words. But yeah, so I'm doing that. I'm someone who's always really like litigation. I like writing. I like reading. I like learning.
And so you're going to stick with this firm, you think? You think this is your future, or you might maybe go out on your own? Any idea? Or you're just kind of like going with it for now?
I'm just going with it for now. I mean, I really like the culture of the firm. It's a lot different than what I've been used to. It's a great firm. Everyone's super nice, which I think is really important in law, to actually be nice to the people you work with, which is not super common at every law firm.
Totally.
But
I've been there,
I do really like the culture and the people I work with. And I'm doing actual work, which is great. Doing, working until it's a more of a mid-sized law firm. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing like actual tangible work. I'm not just locked in the library doing research all day. I'm doing things that are filed with the court. I'm sending letters to clients.
Good for you. It's a lot of hands-on experience going on. Yeah.
And so that's been really great because that's what I've always wanted, is to practice the law.
Y'all, you're doing it now. I mean, just like, I cannot wait to see what you do. Your story is awesome. And thanks for being so real and raw and honest about everything that you experienced. If there was one lesson that you were, talking to a young, aspiring law student, like there was one piece of advice you'd want to give them, what would you say?
I think I would say take a deep breath, because nothing is quite as serious in the moment as it is in looking back at it. When I was studying for the bar, looking back at 1L, I was like, that's so silly. Why was I so stressed? It was a class. Now that I'm a lawyer actually doing work, not that the bar was silly, but like I could have taken a deep breath. I could have not gotten so in my head. And I think getting out of your head is something that's going to be really useful to you to just sort of get perspective, get your bearings on the world, and sort of just plant yourself, recognize that you're lucky to be in a position where you're in law school or taking the bar and you've gone that far, and just take a deep breath and try and get out of your head, because sometimes you can be your own worst enemy when you're in your head.
That is really strong, powerful advice. Thank you for that, because you're so right. Everything works out the way it's supposed to work out. And you just keep going and keep going and keep pushing. And then all of a sudden you're a lawyer, right? And in those days are your dark days where you're not passing the test, and then you get fired from your job and everything's like spiraling, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take a week or two. I'm going to, do my best to keep pushing, but I'm going to get this done. I have to pass this test. It's a non-negotiable. And when I was taking the test, I had the same mantra, similar, of like, I'm never taking this again. It's that ruthlessness, that relentlessness that keeps you going and keeps you pushing until that finish line that got you there. So your mentality, I think, is definitely the number one focus of your journey. And thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for being on Law Life today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me and being the reason I passed the bar. So,
well, you're the reason, of course. I always say that. But you are so welcome. I was very blessed to have guided you to your journey and finish line of passing the exam. So thanks for trusting CA Bar Style, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Everyone, thank you for listening to Law Life. Have a great day. You've been listening to Law Life, a podcast about navigating law, life, and everything in between with host Shana Karpeles. Thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for episode updates. For more information on the show or preparing for the California bar exam, you can visit us on YouTube at CA Bar Style.